Hello and welcome to Board with Kids, where we check out different board games to play with your family. Today we are talking about IceCool, a flicking game that came out in 2016 for 2 to 4 players about a bunch of penguins in school trying to catch all their fish before lunchtime. The recommended age is 6+, but I can see maybe even 4-year-olds playing this simple game. In this dexterity game, players take turns being the school monitor, who gets points for catching the other players, who are truant penguins, trying to run around the school, catching their fish hung in doorways. This is a high-energy game that requires dexterity, strong fingers, and a little bit of luck. So, to learn more, let's dive right in to see how it's played. To set up, you arrange the 5 schoolroom boxes so that the colored dots in the doorways match. There is only one correct layout for the rooms. There are expansions and sequels that introduce other boxes and rooms to allow for different layouts. Once arranged, you use the 4 white fish tokens to keep the rooms together. Each player chooses a color and takes the penguin, 3 fish tokens, and 2 cards matching their color. Shuffle all the fish cards and make a face-down pile near the play area. Finally, choose a player to be the first catcher. Everyone will have a turn to be the catcher once. And that's it for setup. The game is played in as many rounds as there are players, and in each round there are 3 phases. In phase 1, round setup. In this quick setup phase, each runner attaches one of their fish tokens on each of the 3 doorways marked with the fish symbol, and the catcher places his penguin in the kitchen, in box number 2, anywhere within the red lined area. Phase 2, flicking penguins. The round begins with the player to the left of the catcher, and play continues clockwise. On a player's first turn, they place their penguin on the red circle in the classroom box 1 and flicks it with their finger. The goal of the player is to flick their penguins completely through a doorway with one of their fish hanging overhead. The rules have examples of what is considered going through and what happens if the penguins get stuck, but the general rule is the penguin has to start completely on one side of the door and end up fully on the other side of it for a count. The rulebook has examples on what is considered going through and what happens if penguins get stuck or near a wall, but the general rule is that penguins have to start completely on one side of the door and end up fully on the other side for it to count. When a player successfully catches a fish, he removes that fish token and draws a fish card. Fish cards have values ranging from 1 to 3 and will be added as points at the end of the game. Normally, your fish cards are kept face down after you look at them, but on your turn, after your flick, you can choose to turn face up 2 fish cards with value of 1 to immediately get a bonus turn. You don't lose these cards that you flip up. They still count as points at the end of the game, but you keep them face up as a reminder that you have already used that power already with those cards. All players can use this ability during their turn, provided they have the 2 fish cards of value 1 face down. Players continue to take turns flicking their penguins. If a player penguin makes contact with the catcher's penguin on any person's turn, the catcher takes that player's ID. The player caught still continues to take their normal turn. Phase 3, round end. The round ends when either 1, any runner has collected all 3 fish tokens of their color, or 2, the catcher has caught all runners and has all of their IDs. Once either of these happen, each player draws 1 card from the fish pile for each ID card they have at that point. The catcher will always have his own ID card, and he will also have any he's captured. Runners will have their ID card if they did not get caught. All players retrieve their ID cards and 3 fish tokens. Then the player to the left of the catcher becomes the new catcher for the next round. Then you return to phase 1, round setup, putting the penguins on, taking turns flicking until the end of the round, and repeat until each player has had a turn being the catcher. Once you have played as many rounds as the number of players in this way, count the number of victory points you have from your fish cards, including the face-up ones, and the highest total wins. There are rule clarifications as well as answers to specific situations that may arise, in addition to special rules for a 2-player version of the game found in the rulebook, but I won't cover that here. That's all you need to know about how to play IceCool. Here are my final thoughts on this game. This is a wonderfully silly game. I find the rules of the game are a bit flimsy and maybe not the best way to frame the game about flicking penguins. But the theme is fun and the flicking itself is very enjoyable. I was able to play this with my kids when they were quite young because it was easy enough to explain to each whether they were catching or running for fish. The actual execution of the flicking by younger kids may be less consistent, and it'll be up to you to allow for mulligans and redos as appropriate to keep things fun for everyone. I really appreciate and like that even if you get caught by the catcher, you can continue to play, and you only lose one potential fish card. No problems with having someone being caught early and having to sit out the entire round or something. The turns are fairly quick and the energy is very high. I love how the box itself, except for the cover, is the blocks that you use to build the play area. That's really clever. All the other components are pretty standard. The fish cards are basic cards and can be bent or otherwise marked over time, but it's not too serious of a game, so that doesn't really matter in the long run. I really appreciate games that can be taught very easily, and this is one of those games where if one person knows the rules, teaching the game can be as simple as flick this at that. Everything else can be explained as needed. My kids enjoy this game more than I do, and sometimes I see them just setting up the board and flicking the penguins around without playing the actual game. I would give this a final score of a 7 out of 10. It's fun, but the novelty of the game wears off a little bit over time. There's just not enough meat on the bones of the flicking mechanism. It's still a recommend, but it's probably more enjoyable for younger families. That's it for this episode of Bored with Kids. And remember, with all these board games, there's no excuse to be bored with kids. Bye.